Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, January the 4th, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe. That is Scott Doctorman. If you're watching us on YouTube live, and we're going to kind of monitor the situation here. There's been a police confirmed school shooting in Perry, Iowa this morning. And a few details are trickling out right now, but we're going to kind of monitor, see how things go, and continue with the podcast here and step out if we feel like this just isn't working. But we'll try to keep you guys up to date on what we hear and what we see on this podcast as it goes on. Just awful situation, Scott.
Yeah, there really are no words that we could use that adequately describe how we feel right now. I mean, let's face it. Whether we're talking about the bowl loss, the future, who may be visiting, Caitlin Clark's shot, and the men's basketball loss, none of it matters to what happens at Perry High School and the surrounding area. So, I don't want to be hollow and say thoughts and prayers or whatever. I mean, that's a given at this point, but certainly my focus, my mental focus is not strictly on, sports right now.
No, it's going to be, and it's these situations you kind of you don't know what to do. Scott and I kind of talked about it before we hit record, but maybe we can share some information on here for people that are busy and not able to follow along with the news cycle right now. And we certainly will do that, and we'll try to talk Iowa athletics. If this feels like it's not working, we're going to tap out and do it a different day. But like Scott said, hoping for the best in this situation. The thoughts and prayers are the least we could do. It's awful. It gives you that pit in your stomach, the lump in your throat, the tears in your eyes. You start to think about, especially, and it's certainly not restricted to parents, because these tragedies hit everybody. But certainly as a parent, and when it's at a school, it hits hard. And it's something I think about every day when I send my kids to school. So, certainly, thinking about the parents right now who are going through this and going to the school to make sure everything's okay. It's a terrible, terrible scene.
Yeah. I mean, it's not much more I can add to that. One life is way too many in this situation, and we won't touch the third rail when it comes to how we feel about certain objects and stuff. But let's just hope for the best. Let's hope that nobody is mortally wounded and that the person is caught.
And I know there's some information at the Perry News. I know they're there on the ground, so that might be somewhere people want to go to get more information. And I'm sure for those that don't know, Perry is, I'm not sure mileage wise, it's northwest of Des Moines. I'm not sure how far out of Des Moines it is. It's not that far though, so I'm sure there will be plenty of news presence there as well. But hopefully we can get some more information here, and it's the best news we could possibly get. And until then, we'll talk some Hawkeyes here, and Scott and I will both kind of be refreshing Twitter and other social media feeds to try to keep everybody that's listening updated on what's going on. But we appreciate you guys listening to this. And where do we start, Scott? Let's start with the heroics on Tuesday night at Carver Hawkeye Arena. We have plenty of football to get to, but that is really the national story as it pertains to Iowa athletics. And the legend just continues to grow. And as we talked about on Festivus, putting out the issues we have with social media, we can't just enjoy a moment like that, can we? We have to we have to get on social media, and there's a coach from another top 10 team that it weighed in on the shot. And I just think I don't want to give too much air to that, but it just is an example of just not being able to enjoy the good things in life by bickering on social media and getting after people. But congrats to Caitlin Clark. She is just an amazing, amazing athlete. And no moment is too big, Scott. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, I know. And every time she does something, we run out of superlatives to describe the situation and describe her impact and what she's able to do. I mean, a 40-point night in a 50-50 game, and to hit that shot from the beak, what 30 plus feet away, step back, just, we will never see her like again. And I know I may have said that about Megan Gustafson, but and maybe Luca Garza, but not in my lifetime have we seen an athlete at Iowa that's been able to capture the imagination, the crowd, become, to match the moment. I mean, with her persona can hit these shots. And the other day was just another example of why she is the most widely known collegiate athlete, female athlete, and potentially athlete in the least of the United States.
I think you kind of know you've made it, and you're attracting attention to your sport that at levels that haven't been there before. When you see Kornheiser and Wilbon on, pardon the interruption, screwing up the facts of what's going on. And that's like what happens with, other popular sports and athletes in the country, where there's a bunch of misinformation out there. And we got to see that after Caitlin's shot, with people talking about her not be, losing money by going to the WNBA and all this other silliness. And it's kind of like, okay, she's there. She's made it. She's on these talking head shows like with Stephen A. Smith and, Skip Bayless and things like that. People are talking about her, which is great for the sport, for her and her brand, for the University of Iowa. I mean, it's like you said, it's something we've never seen before. And you never want to say never, but it's unlikely that we'll see anything like this again anytime soon.
I've used the phrase transcendent athlete quite a few times to describe her, and it's really, to me, the perfect description, because when we go to Carver Hawkeye Arena or out in public, and you see boys, even teenagers, wearing 22 Clark t-shirts, that's different than we've ever seen before. Nobody ever wore Monica Seles t-shirts that were, my age. I mean, I kind of liked her back then, but I was in college. So, but, Anna Kournikova, it was looks based. It was never about how she performed on the tennis courts. And then I think what we're looking now with Caitlin Clark, it's all about her swag, how she handles herself, that she, no moment's too big, as you said. She's Michael Jordan. I mean, she can do everything on the floor that people seem to, you expect it. She makes the spectacular look routine, and it's just a really unreal to see. And it's unfortunate when you have a coach of a major program kind of, the shot's great, but what about, the real MVP was the official, and then you have fans complaining, oh, she got the shot off late, or people misrepresenting the facts of whether she, the attendance is bigger at men's games or women's games. That all that's really, to me, is incidental. This is really the fact is, she's the most exciting athlete maybe in the country, and if not in the world right now. And we better freaking enjoy it, because if she does hang it up after the NCAA tournament, we will never see her like again. It's just, we may see great players, we may see a national player of the year again. But to see what she has done and she continues to do on a nightly basis. We'll never see it again.
Seems kind of appropriate that shortly after Serena Williams retires, there's another transcendent, as to use your word, type of female athlete that continues to grow the popularity of female sports. And you know, you have a daughter, I have two daughters. It's great to see. I watched the game with my 13-year-old the other night. She was more impressed by the block shot than the three-pointer. She goes, I've seen the three-pointer a lot, but really that block shot was huge.
Yeah, it was. Sadly, I was coming back from a meaningless bowl game, and I was so wiped out because of an early travel that got messed up that at halftime I'm like on the couch, and my wife's like, just go to bed. I'm like, all right, it's on Peacock. We've got Peacock. I'll watch it later. And then I got woke up a couple hours later from our Slack channel. Caitlin Clark buzzer beater. Would you like to contribute? And I'm like, oh no. So yeah, this is so yeah, it was one of our more popular stories on our website. And I'm like, damn, I wish I would have went to that instead of the bowl game. But she's truly remarkable. And this week she's going to Rutgers. The game is sold out. It's been sold out for months. And this was before they chose to honor C. Vivian Stringer, which makes it wholly appropriate. We look at this, and you've got she is leading a surge and a wave of female athletes allowing themselves to be themselves, no matter how they are, what they want to do. And it's the most exciting period in women's sports, collegiate sports, that I've ever seen.
Yep. And the Dawn Staley smoke, again, is just another sign of pettiness. We see it all the time in men's athletics, the pettiness and rivalries and things like that. So is it good for the sport? I don't know. We could debate that, but it's getting attention, and mostly positive attention. And that's a good thing. I think from a basketball standpoint, Scott, I think we saw, and you've mentioned this on the podcast, that they're going to lose games and they're going to get everybody's best shot. And Michigan State is a good team. It's not a slouch team. And there are other teams in this. A week from Saturday, Indiana comes to town, and that's going to be, prime time on Fox, I believe, or at least one of the national stations a week from Saturday. So it's going to stay in the news, no doubt about it. But from a basketball standpoint, I think we learned the other night that Iowa needs to play at the top of its game to not need these end game heroics from Caitlin. She's certainly capable of doing it, but they need to play better from start to finish for the 40.
There is some concern, I think, that's legitimate about this team, and they are a terrific team, and they're led by one of the best players, as we said, we've seen in this generation, if not ever. But when you've got a 7 or 9 point lead at halftime or late in the game, and you're up 66-57, I think it was, or something like that, and to let Michigan State come back, it does show there are some major concerns on this team. How are they? Michigan State plays a similar brand of basketball, and I think they played really well. I think they've got to be applauded for that. But for Iowa, you've got to tighten it up defensively. You cannot allow them to, in your building, in a sold-out arena, you can't allow the team on the road, when you have the best player in the country, to just continue to grind against you. You're going to have to step up defensively, and that's been an issue for them for a long time. But they're going to get everybody's best shot, because they're going to walk into that building and go, wow, look at all the people here, cameras. I mean, next week against Indiana, it's on Fox in prime time. I mean, that's something, so they're going to recognize that. They know what happened the last time they were here. But if you can't even slow down Mackenzie Holmes, I mean, that's basically, to use a football analogy, if they get the ball into Mackenzie Holmes deep in the post, it's like running the football for a first down every single time. And they got to be careful of that, because it's easier to score when you're right next to the bucket than it is from outside three, no matter how easy Caitlin makes it look.
I believe the Rutgers game on Friday night is on BTN, if I'm not mistaken. So You'll be able to watch all these games. I'm not it may be my internet, man, but I am not a fan of the Peacock feed. It goes in and out for us. Maybe I need to update the app on the smart TV or whatever, but that's my complaint about the Peacock stream. I prefer Big Ten Network or ESPN or something like that, but I'm just appreciative of that these games being televised, which is nice. And we sent John Bonenkamp over for the women's game the other night. I stayed and monitored the men's game on TV and then wrote about that. Shifting gears to that, Scott, 0-3 now in the Big Ten, started 0-3 in the Big Ten last year, able to recover and get to 11-9 and make the NCAA tournament for a fourth year in a row. Going to be more of a challenge this year. No doubt about it. The next game is Rutgers on Saturday. I think that's an 11 a.m. tip or noon. Is it 11?
Yeah, 11 yeah.
That's,
early one.
At Carver. And I watched Rutgers last night against Ohio State. That was a pretty good game. Ohio State ended up winning. But Rutgers has some size, has some athleticism, and will be a challenge, no doubt, for Iowa. Has been a challenge for Iowa since Steve Peichel took over there, but got to get it fixed in a hurry. Now you're 0-3. There really is no more wiggle room. You never want to call early January game a must win, but they got to win on Saturday, Scott.
If you want to have any kind of a prayer for the postseason, you really can't afford to lose at home against a team like that. And I'm not suggesting that Rutgers is a bad team or anything like that. It's just you gotta secure home court, and you got to secure home court with a team that's probably comparable to you. I mean, if you're going to Jersey Mike's and playing this game, then I think you've got to you got to be cognizant of that. But for the most part, I think Iowa's just this is a team that's struggling. And and I'm not going to say that it's bad because of the opponent they played. I mean, they played at Kohl Center. It's a tough place to play. It's a good team they played against. So it's just, to me, I think they've got some real concerns. And so now that are they 0-3 or 0-4 in the conference?
0-3.
0-3. Okay. Big Ten standings has them wrong, has them 0-4. But
yeah, they lost to two ranked teams in Wisconsin and Purdue, both on the road. So you can kind of say, okay, nothing, the Michigan loss at home is one you have to get back. So not like sky is falling, but 0-3 is 0-3, however you slice it. And, you've got to get to 500 in your league, at minimum. So you're talking, 10-7 the rest of the way, with some really tough games, which again makes Saturday that much more important.
The next three games are the most pivotal games of the season, really, to me, because Rutgers at home on a Saturday, Nebraska at home on a Friday night, and then at Minnesota. And Nebraska showed it was very capable of competing at a high level yesterday by blowing out Indiana. You look at Rutgers, they're a decent team as well, and Minnesota isn't, but you're still going to the barn, and they've always struggled with the barn for 100 years. It's just the way it is. So if Iowa could put together a run and play well and win 3 games, then I think they'll be okay. Then it's like, all right, well, they're kind of back to their base, and let's see what the rest of the season holds. But if they go anything short of 2-1 on this next 3 games line, it is going to be, we're looking at NIT at best, and it has the potential for everything to fall apart. Because, I don't think the Big Ten is great because then they play Purdue, and how that can go. And then, you're on the road a couple of times, Michigan, Indiana. And then by late, if you're like 2-8 or something to open this season, forget it. This team just doesn't have the experience, let alone, we don't know about the skill, but it doesn't have the experience to really bounce back and be able to, put itself on the right track to compete for an NCAA tournament spot.
And I think the league is down a little bit this year, in my opinion, from what I've seen to this point anyway. Purdue is on another level. Purdue is far and away the best team in this conference. I'm not saying they're going to run it 20-0 because that's really hard to do, but
and they can't. They lost to Northwestern.
Oh, that's right. They lost at Northwestern, 19-1.
Yeah.
But that goes to show you that winning on the road in this league is difficult. So again, Saturday against Rutgers is ultra important. I think we saw the other night, Scott, how important Ben Krikke is. He got in foul trouble, played a shade over 20 minutes, I think. And that really was, I think that really hurt them because I feel like the chemistry between he and Owen Freeman is really starting to come together. Kricke's showing I think he's hit threes in back-to-back games now. He's starting to show his he can extend his offensive game out to the three-point line. I don't think you want him shooting a ton of three-pointers, but he can face up and shoot. That leaves the inside open for Owen Freeman, who's just been a revelation. I don't think many people predicted he would be this good. But he's really, if you're looking to the future, he certainly gives you a lot of hope for the future because he's just been outstanding. But I like that they've kind of landed on this now, but playing those two guys together. I was unsure of it earlier. I thought I liked Freeman coming off the bench and that energy, but he's giving them energy from the start of the game being out there. And I really like that. And I like that combination of those two bigs, especially when, you don't have a lot of size on this team.
Sure, and I think right now, they've got, their style of play right now is really kind of contributing to some of their errors. First of all, I do like Owen Freeman. I'm glad that they decided to go ahead and start him because I think we could have, he could have been a guy that you really, and we've seen this before where you have a lot of energy coming off the bench, but I think in his case, to get it off the tip. And he brings, he has size, and Krikke would have been the only guy with size. Now you're in the Big Ten, you kind of need that. Very rarely are you going to face a team that's got a, 4 guards and a forward type of offense. So you need that kind of power figure inside, and it helps take some of the stress away from Krikke playing defense too. And but to me, there's some other concerns like. They're not crashing the offensive boards at all. And I know that's not a style for them, but, you got to, you look at like Patrick McCaffrey, he has 2 offensive rebounds all year. And, is that just, hey, get him out and run the whole time? But, you might want to have him. He's got size. He's got experience. You might want to get him crashing the boards a little bit more. And, and because otherwise you're kind of one-shot team, and this team's, again, not quite good enough, not experienced enough. And I don't know if that means, bring him off the bench. I don't know if that's even plausible being, his relationship to the coach, but I think that overall there are a lot of concerns here I have for this team. And I'm just not sure, like Perkins, I thought played awesome. Obviously 25 points and 4 rebounds, and drew 9 fouls, had 3 steals. He was awesome. I thought Freeman was awesome, and Krikke got in foul trouble. And then, with Peyton Sanford, he's hit or miss. If he's hitting, he's as dangerous as they come. If he's not,
I think he hit his first 3 did he finish 3 for 6?
Yeah, he finished 3 for 7 from 3, 3 from 11 from the field.
Okay, so he hit his first 3 threes and then missed his last 4.
Yeah.
The other night. So to your point, that's still good though. I mean, you'll take 3 of 7.
Yeah, you'll take 3 of 7 from 3. I mean, but Pat McCaffrey's stat line 2 of 9, 5 points. He's playing 26 plus minutes. You got to get more from that position. You just do. And Desante Bowen, I thought had some energy coming off the bench. I like Brock Harding. He still has a few too many turnovers. I mean, it was 3 and 2 assist to turnover, but still, I like the way he plays. I like the swagger he brings, and I like, Bowen is a quick athlete, but I look at Dembele. Is he better getting more minutes than just 7 plus? And you've got to, if you get Krikke in foul trouble and he can't play as much, somebody has to replace that, and it can't just be Owen Freeman. So I do look at, Patrick McCaffrey is probably somebody that needs to.
Did Perkins play 40 the other night?
He played, no, he played 31.
Okay.
Sanford played more than he did, and so did Freeman, actually.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's guys logging a lot of minutes now, and that's something you have to consider too as the season goes on. You know what the grind is of the Big Ten. You've been around this league a long time. You kind of have to monitor those things. And Freeman, I think, would play 50 minutes if he was allowed to. Just really the activity level for him and the tenacity. He's a shot blocker. That's a component that he's brought since he got to the starting lineup that I think is really important for this team, because we know defense is usually a concern, and he helps by giving a presence in the middle. I don't know if I have a comp for him either from what we've seen, at least from the Fran era. I was thinking, Olashaney with offense, with more of an offensive game early in his career, but he's just a fun guy to watch. I really enjoy watching him and his passion and his drive for this game. And he does not look like a freshman at all. He looks like, hey, I belong out here and I'm going to take it to you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been demonstrated by his number of, Freshman of the Week awards. He's out there balling every night, doing great, competing against some great, frontline players. I really like him. And I think he's going to be one of the better players in the country. Forget the Big Ten, but one of the better players in the country, even by next year. And so what was a concern for me from the very beginning, the front court with him and Cricky, I kind of like that. Yeah. And I think, the inconsistency of the backcourt, I think Tony Perkins is definitely a starter. Oh, is he a starting point guard, or is he starting two guard? That remains to be seen. Sanford, when he's hitting, is again, one of the upper level players in the Big Ten. That just kind of depends. But what's the next one? Patrick McCaffrey's kind of been there. You look at Josh Dix, kind of there. Harding has been up and down. I like the energy he brings. I like the passion and the passing. What's next for him? It's consistency and maturity on the floor, and that's going to come. He's going to be really good. But Bowen, Dembele, even Price Sanford, you got to get some somewhere. Somebody's got to be more consistent. And a couple somebody's, not just one person, to make it a starting five. So I really like four other players. The rest of them, it's a matter of who can kind of rise up, because the season continues to go on. Nobody's going to wait for Iowa to catch up.
Yeah, and how good the coaches are in this league, and they're going to adjust. They're going to start to pay even. Not that Owen Freeman is an unknown at this point. He's proved. I mean, people know who he is, but they're going to find ways to frustrate him, especially on the road. Try to get him in foul trouble. They did it to Cricky the other night. They're going to take Tony away, make Tony shoot from the outside. Do not let him penetrate. If he hits the three, great, more power to him. They're gonna counter what Iowa's been successful at. So kind of like baseball, you have to adjust to what the pitcher's doing, and that's going to continue to happen throughout the season. But you're right. I think they need more from more guys. They need more than a few guys. Like, they need more than Cricky, Freeman, and Tony to carry some nights, because those guys are going to get the focal point. They're going to be the top of the scouting report for opponents.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, when you get when you continue to go through Big Ten play, whether it's at Wisconsin, Steve Peichel is a tremendous coach. Nebraska is playing well. They've proved it last night. They've proved it all year, and on. Purdue against Zach Edey. Zach Edey will be able to handle those guys. They're going to have to compete, but he's a pretty good player. So, I mean, it could really cause some issues. And then a young team like that, without a lot of veteran leadership, you don't know what's going to happen when the spiral really hits. Are they going to galvanize and push through it and compete, or are they going to, the situation just going to kind of roll them? And, I think it's potential to go either way, unfortunately.
Yep. And you feel like this next week or so is going to tell a lot, because you either get back up off the mat or you stay down and dig yourself a bigger hole, and you don't want that. You want to be able to get your head back above water. I'm just throwing a bunch of cliches out right now, but they
Right.
work. So yeah, we'll kind of see how that goes. We've got the Iowa women are on the road at Rutgers Friday night. The men play host to Rutgers Saturday morning. So quick turnaround there. You'll get a lot of Hawkeye hoops in about 16, 18-hour period. So look forward to that. I don't know. Did you catch the AJ Ferrari act at the Soldier Salute? Did you see the video or any of that stuff?
Yeah, I watched the video of it. I wasn't there. Obviously, I was in Orlando, and I was kind of busy. There was a lot of news going on in Orlando, so I didn't get a chance to really focus too much on it. But it seemed to be kind of a wild act. Were you there, Rob?
I did not. I was not there this year. I went last year. I had some other stuff that I needed to do this year and could not make it out there, unfortunately. I followed along and was kind of following along as that was going on because I was interested. Obviously, it's an interesting storyline for Iowa wrestling with the Ferrari brothers and the family. I mean, he was here on an official visit, stayed, wrestled it open in this tournament, and basically won the championship until he got DQ'd. It's just I'm not going to go dig too deep into this, Scott, because I don't know the details as well as guys that are locked into wrestling and cover this on a daily basis. I just know from somebody who covers Iowa athletics and wrestling on a cursory level that what I saw was not good, especially when you consider the background of the individual coming into this. Having some self-awareness that I want another chance, and to do that, I think calls into question. And I think, just watching it from a public standpoint and watching the reaction from fans, passionate. You talk about passionate. There are no fans more passionate than Iowa wrestling fans when it comes to our little part of the world here. And they were not happy. And they were tagging Beth Getz in responses to the video that was out there, asking her, and you can't go by, you can't live by the social media police, but that reaction was pretty, for the most part, I would say 80-20 people saying, no, you can't let this happen. And so I think that's a storyline. I think it's a storyline moving forward in our neck of the woods.
Yeah. From what I gather for wrestling fans is that they're willing to overlook a lot of things, aggressiveness, toughness, things that even straddle that line, where they kind of grit their teeth. Oh, I don't know. But I think he crossed it, and we know about his past and everything. So I don't know that this is a type of situation that you want to invite because you don't know what's next. I mean, he knew what was riding on this, and yet he still chose to, flip everybody off and fight and then kind of.
Why would he flip off the Iowa wrestling fans? That was just weird.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. And so people don't they want to win. They don't mind winning with swagger, bravado, conceit, whatever, but they don't want to. They want to win with class too, and lose. You don't have to be happy with your loss, but you do have to respect it. And I don't think he did. And I think that's right now. I don't know, Rob. I mean, what do you think his future is in Iowa? Do you think that there's a chance or not?
I don't know. I don't want to say. I'm kind of interested to see how Beth handles this because this is another. I think it's been proven she made the right move with Brian Ferentz. I don't think anybody would argue that outside of the Ferentz family right now. But this is a situation. It's not that level. It doesn't get the focus that football does, but it's a decision. If you bring this kid in here and something even worse than this happens, it's on your plate. It falls at your feet. So I don't know. How do you handle this, Scott? Do if you're Beth, do you meet with the Ferrari family and brands and say, hey, here are the stipulations, here's the zero tolerance policy? What I mean, but I think it does need to be addressed. I don't think she can ignore it.
Yeah, I agree with you on all of that, and I think this is where you got to hold Tom accountable.
Yep.
Say anything that happens, Tom, you're responsible for it. So you better keep him on the straight and narrow, or it's on you. And I'm trusting you in this situation, and because Tom has been very vocal in his support for Beth Getz in a lot of different ways, and I think she can do the same. And if Tom says, "Look, we're not going to have any more problems," then I'll say, then if I were her, I'd say, "Okay, but you handle this." And if I have to step in here, it's not going to be a good look. And it's not going to, and it's not going to look good on you. So I would put enough faith. I mean, Tom Brands has been here, other than his stint at Virginia Tech, forever and a day. So put it on him and Terry, and say, you handle this. But if I don't want any more embarrassments, I don't want any more of this, especially now that we're in wrestling season and football doesn't quite overshadow it the way it did while everybody was down on location in Orlando and it happened at some tournament in Coralville, Iowa.
Yeah, no doubt. And for those that are unfamiliar, AJ has younger brothers that Iowa, I believe, has a commitment from the youngest brother, who's one of the top high school wrestlers in the country. I think he's a senior this year. I apologize for not knowing his name, but there's that layer to this as well. You obviously, if you don't take AJ, the chances of you landing his younger brother, but is it worth? You gotta weigh risk and reward, right, Scott, and what you're willing to tolerate and put up with to try to compete with Penn State. That's obviously you're chasing Penn State and how you can compete with them. What do you do to get there? Do you make concessions to get there? And it's a tough spot to be in. I'm not going to say it isn't, but there are consequences for your choices and your actions.
Absolutely. So, this is a tough spot for everyone. And this is where Tom needs to be the guy. Tom needs to step to the plate, and I'm sure he will. And if he doesn't think that he can handle it, then he needs to get rid of him. And he needs to understand those consequences, because the only thing worse than finishing second in the country for Iowa wrestling is really doing something without class, with having a dangerous situation, having people embarrassed, because you don't want to embarrass this program. It's too proud. It's outstanding. I mean, the fan support is second to none, and you want to win it as on all costs. You're willing to, I don't know, cut corners, at least with personality and stuff. But at the same time, you can't just put yourself in a position where you can have something dangerous happen. And I'm not saying on the mat, because dangerous doesn't really happen on the mat. I'm talking about outside the mat and in different areas, because there's that potential too.
An interesting situation to monitor. We certainly will do that moving forward. I feel like this is a good time to take a break. I did see Scott, Dave Price, journalist in Central Iowa, works TV over there, has reported that Dallas County law enforcement will hold a news briefing at 10 a.m. Central Time this morning on the shooting at Perry. So that I would assume that's going to be carried throughout the state for folks that want to watch that, and we'll keep an eye on it as well. Going to take a break now. We'll come back and talk some football as long as it's appropriate. If you weren't here for the top of the podcast, Scott and I are kind of moving along here, just monitoring the situation at Perry High School, the school shooting, and we'll stick with this as long as we feel like it's appropriate. If it's not, if we get to a point where we need to tap out, we will. Want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We appreciate Systems Unlimited for their support of our podcast and the great work that they've been doing in our community for over half a century. We'll hear from a few more sponsors now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to dive into some Hawkeye football. Hang in there. We're back on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. It is Thursday, January 4th, about 10 minutes before 10 a.m. Central Time. As we said, going into the break, a news conference out in Perry by law enforcement, school shooting in Perry, details coming out as we speak here. We'll continue on with the podcast, see what happens there. Have you found any new information, Scott?
The shooter is deceased, and it happened about 7:30 this morning. Apparently the principal has been shot, and several kids have been shot. I don't know anything specifically, but we'll know more, obviously. And we're doing this in real time, so in 10 plus minutes, we'll have probably a little bit more background. But again, a difficult day to do something like this, Rob. But again, it's tough.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about pales in comparison in importance to what's going on, obviously, in Perry. Had we started this at 10, maybe we don't go, but information has kind of been coming out slow here, and we figured if we're going to be live on YouTube anyway, we could kind of update people that are watching us live on YouTube. So if you're listening to this on the podcast version, you probably have all the information or a lot of the information that we don't know right now. And we're certainly not doing this to be respectful for any potential victims. So hopefully you understand that. And it's kind of a timing thing. And we've decided to just kind of go on with this and give you guys updates when we can. Because we know a lot of people that listen to our podcast aren't in Iowa and don't have maybe the same access to the news that we do. So we'll continue to monitor that. And the press conference is coming up in about 10 minutes, or is scheduled to come up in about 10 minutes. Sometimes those things are delayed as well. As somebody who's covered those before, unfortunately, there's a lot more pressing issues than holding a press conference. But get into the football talk, Scott. Wanted to congratulate 3 former Hawkeyes and a 4th for being an alternate for the Pro Bowl, Tristan Wirfs. I don't know how he's not a Pro Bowler. I didn't look at the other offensive linemen. I'm sure they're really good too. But Tyler Linderbaum makes the Pro Bowl in his 2nd season with the Baltimore Ravens. So everybody that was bitching about taking him because he has short arms, that's been proven false. George Kittle, a veteran of the Pro Bowl and seems to be a popular character in those Pro Bowl games that they play. So that'll be fun. And then the rookie. What a story, Sam Laporta, man. What a story.
Yeah. When you look at a lot of what Iowa had, the Iowa great stories, I think Kirk kind of needs to update those and refresh them. But, between Sam Laporta and Joe Evans, I think both of those are 2 of the best stories Iowa's produced in recent times. I mean, Sam was, but Bowling Green, I think, was his best offer. And Iowa gets down there, finally watches him play, decides, what, we'll take a 3rd tight end in this class. And of course, Logan Lee moves over to the defensive line and had a really good, opportunity. So I think overall, we're looking at, just some great stories. I mean, Laporta to be able to do what he's done last year. Remember, he had one receiving touchdown at Iowa. He's got 9 thus far, which is, I think only a couple shy of the rookie record. So it's amazing. So,
yeah, I mean, none of the 3 that we mentioned were hot items on the recruiting trail. Laporta, Kittle, or Linderbaum. So just goes to show that it's important to identify and develop. And I think that can segue us into our football discussion about. I've kind of been thinking about Scott after watching the season and watching the Citrus Bowl about identifying and developing at three really important positions: quarterback, offensive line, wide receiver. I'm wondering about not only the evaluations on the front end, but the development once they get here. It's not a 1 year sample size now. We're seeing it multiple years. And you think about multiple year offensive struggles, it's not just Spencer Petras. It's not just Deacon Hill. It's bigger than that. You saw it Monday with, he gets protection and then he misfires, or the protection breaks down. He rushes to the throw. Then there's a dropped pass on the other end. It's just, there needs to be improvement throughout. It's not just Brian Ferentz. It's not just the quarterbacks. It's this whole unit really needs to make, I think, significant progress this offseason. And I'm not breaking any news there.
Yeah, I mean, considering I spent significant time writing about it, researching yesterday, the last team in the Big Ten to have fewer yards in an average in a season was Northwestern in '84. And so we're talking almost 40 years since somebody's had, and those Northwestern teams were just ghastly. I mean, that was when they really contemplated going to the Ivy League, just shutting down football altogether. And as we've seen on Iowa's offense, that they pretty much did the same thing. They shut it down, and
they would have struggled in the Ivy League.
The sad part is, Rob, what we saw in the last two games, both shutouts. Iowa would have been better off had they taken 3 knees and punted on these possessions, because the offense was a net negative. Not only did they not score, but the other day when you have a strip sack at your own 2-yard line, when you have a pick six, when you throw an interception in the end zone, when you have all day to throw and you throw it into double coverage, largely those 3 are on the quarterback, and that's pretty much the case there. But it does talk about the entire system. I mean, you remove those plays and maybe they lose 21-3. Or something like that. If you remove the strip sacks in the Big Ten championship game, then there's 10 less points. So you're losing 16. Based on the way the defense played, and then you take away the long kickoff return. So they haven't added anything to this offense. And I look at those 3 positions that you highlighted. I mean, quarterback is easy to spot. It has not been good since Nate Stanley was there, and it's not been very good since CJ Beathard was there. I mean, Nate had a lot of good numbers, but there's the actual reality of some of those games. He was in the close ones, he wasn't great. But then you start to look at offensive line. Part of it's development, part of it's identification, part of it's bad luck, injuries. But let's face it, they haven't had an Alaric Jackson, a Tristan Wirfs, or a Tyler Linderbaum. That's partly due to identification and recruitment, and it's partly due to they just don't have that, and is the line. I think the line actually is better than it looks, because the passing system is so broken and bad that all they can do is run. Everything's in the box. And, when the opponent has, they have an idea of what's coming and they overload the box. And sometimes it's hard to win one-on-one blocks anyway. So I think if they were able to be more versatile in offense and be 50-50, then I think the offensive line, while not great, would look better if they could complete those passes, get them moving down the field, so then they can run when they're not necessarily going. They're definitely running here.
I think a lot of it is stubbornness. And that to me is what needs to be overcome this offseason, is the willingness to change, the willingness to accept new ideas and modernization. And I was not comforted by Kirk Ferentz's comments throughout the week in Orlando as it pertains to the offensive coordinator and the future of this offense. But words don't really mean anything at this point. We've heard words the last few off seasons about how things were going to get better on that side of the ball, and they haven't. It's really putting it into action, Scott. And I guess what's your outlook here? I mean, what's going to happen? Not necessarily who's going to be hired, but we all know that KF is driving the bus here. And who's he going to let on the bus? And is he going to let somebody else drive the bus once in a while?
Mm-hmm. It's fair to be skeptical. I'll say that. I think most people are cynical. And, that's understandable based on what we've seen the last few years. That it's gone from pretty bad 2 years ago to really, really bad to, oh my God, how can it get worse this year? And I don't think it will. I think they could just say, you know what, we're going to punt, on every first down we get next year, and they'll be better than what they are this year. But I think overall, this is the final defining staff move of the Ferentz era. I mean, I would say offensive coordinator, I'd say Ken O'Keefe did a nice job for him as the OC for all those years. I think the statistics now in retrospect really line up. I think, with Greg Davis, it was just an awkward fit. Greg wanted to do things that I think were anti-Iowa, and he tried to marry it with the running game, and it just wasn't really working. People didn't really have to back off. And then, with Brian, there were some positives, and I'm not going to go into them because nobody wants to hear about them. But by and large, the negatives were pretty extreme, and especially the last few years when he had two great tight ends and Hawkinson and Fant, when he had Alric Jackson and Linderbaum and Wirfs, and he had a competent, good quarterback in Nate Stanley, when he had decent receivers and in Brandon Smith and Amir Smith-Marset, and then it looked like a good, competent offense. I mean, they were scoring 30 points a game, and they were looking at times very good, but there were also some real flushable games. There were some games where you're like, this is on the OC, whether it's 2017 at Wisconsin. I remember 2019 at Michigan, where they're inside the 36-yard line 6 different times and only came away with a field goal. That's on, and they kept trying to pass, and they're getting rushed nonstop. It's like, this was like, to me, the typical Ferentz ball, grind it, kick the field goal. It's 10-6, then it's 10-9, and then you put, but there have been lately, they have just completely flatlined. I mean, it has just been last 2 years. It's been as bad as any offense in college football history. Let's call it what it is. I mean, we're talking 40 years for the Big Ten. What was the Big Ten like then? It was, everybody ran 52 defenses. They ran into the center of the line. This is the worst offense in Big Ten history, Rob. And so the bar is not real high for the next person. It's complete 50% of your passes. That's higher than this year. It's, run the ball a little bit better. So do I think Kirk is going to take a step back? I do, because I don't think he's going to hire somebody he's uncomfortable with, but he's also got to make sure that person has his no micromanagement, that he has the ability. Now, Kirk can step in on 4th and 1. Okay, we punt or we kick field. He's the head coach. He deserves that no matter what. But when it comes to creating this offense, he's got to take a step back, or otherwise this thing is going to be, heading back to 8-4, 7-5, which is typical for a year like this that we just experienced.
Yeah, the tightrope act they were able to pull off this year is just, the odds of doing that every year are just astronomical. And they had a favorable schedule. I don't think anybody would deny that. I kind of looked into it a little bit in the column that I wrote after the game, just in terms of, the level of competition. And, they've lost 7 games in a row to ranked teams. And been outscored. I think it's like 235-44 or something like that in those 7 games since the Big Ten championship game of 2021. It's not been good. And It's great to win rivalry trophies. You want to have bragging rights against Iowa State and Nebraska and Wisconsin and Minnesota and all those teams. But at this stage where you are as a program with the resources you have, you need to be able to compete with not necessarily, you're not going to beat Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State on the regular. But the other day against the depleted Tennessee team, that was embarrassing. And you want to be able to compete and have a chance, a puncher's chance. They have no punch.
Yeah.
You have to have an offense that at least has some type of a threat. And that's really the challenge. And I think you made a great point, Scott. Ken O'Keefe and Kirk worked well together. They were on the same page. They Ken understood what Kirk wanted. He worked his philosophy around that. Greg Davis had a much harder time with that. And then I think Brian had an even harder time with that. And he had less experience than the other two, so that makes sense. And there are layers, there's context, there's injuries, there's recruiting, there's development. All those things go into it. But that's really the most important thing here. That's the priority number one is finding an offensive coordinator that can mesh with Kirk.
Yeah. And from the names that I know of and have heard about and that they've investigated, I think he's set that as a priority. That is true. There are some legitimate names that he has looked into. Andy Ludwig is somebody he looked into, was told no, but Paul Christ, Ryan Grubb. I mean, he's shooting his shot, and you got to give him credit for that. But I was kind of saying at the beginning of the year and even last year that this was like a one-armed fighter trying to fight a man, and being able to win because you got your defense and special teams, but you can't win championships just that way. I mean, and even you go back, I mean, people may talk in great glory of the 1981 team. They were 8-4, and they were as bad on offense as this team was. Basically, it was just their defense carried them through some of those wins, and they lost some really rough games. And I agree with you about the traveling trophies. I think they're very important, though. When you lose them, it wounds you. You don't want to lose to your rivals. But when you have a defense like this, and you feel like if that defense plays as well as it did against Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, and you had even the semblance of an offense, that you could take this to the fourth quarter and be competitive. But this offense gave you no reason to believe that it had a chance. I mean, I think I wrote about it after the Big Ten championship that I said, when this defense was on the field, you felt like this team was in there. But when the offense was on the field, you felt like a 10-point lead deficit was might as well have been 100 points. And it was the same way against Tennessee when they were down 14-0. It's like, and this is a team that was missing 3 starters in its secondary, and to be able to not throw. So the development, I think offensive line development has been sketchy. I think the wide receiver development has been horrible, absolutely horrible. I mean, Smith-Marset improved. Brandon Smith had it in him. I don't know how much he improved. I think he could have improved more. But to let go of Charlie Jones, but frankly, it's because he didn't play a whole lot the year before. And people were like, oh, it's just a backup receiver. It's a pretty good receiver. He's in the NFL right now for a reason. And then you look at the other guys and the guys that have left, Arlen Bruce before he got in trouble, Keegan Johnson. Now Caleb Brown didn't play for 3/4 of the season. Then all of a sudden he comes in because of an injury and voila. I mean, how much did Deontay Vines develop? Nothing. And is that on him? Seth Anderson caught the first pass of the season. He caught for a touchdown. He hasn't done anything since then. Is that on him or is that on, and if it can't be all on the player, it has to be on the teacher once in a while. And then of course at quarterback, this is, I mean, you should not fall that far from Cade McNamara to Deacon Hill. We've seen backups, not so much in the Kirk era, but in the past, step in and win games, even if they got to go bare bones. And yeah, they won games. Let's put it that way, but it wasn't because of Deacon Hill. I would be very surprised to see Deacon Hill take another snap for an Iowa Hawkeye football team.
The confounding part for me in that situation, and we've talked about on this podcast, we both really think a lot of Deacon Hill. He's very invested. He wants to do well. He wants to win. He was pushed into playing time before he was ready. based on the hierarchy in quarterback. I just the confounding thing for me, Scott, is Kirk is so cognizant of not wanting to turn the ball over. Yet he's playing a guy who's turning the ball over. What was the risk of playing Marco? I'm never going to be able to resolve that in my head moving forward. That's always going to be part of the 2023 season that I'm like, that's going to confuse me forever.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because when you look at how they did or didn't compete, I probably would have been fine, even though the way he played against Michigan State and Purdue, I wasn't blown away. But I'm like, well, first start at Camp Randall, go ahead and play him. But then after that, the way he played against Minnesota, to me at that point, it's like you got a week off, get Marco in there. You can't be worse off with a true freshman than you are now. And all year, I mean, it got worse. It got worse throughout the course of the year. And then the last two games have been as badly played as we've ever seen. And it took a pick six and a strip sack to pull him out. And then you look and see what Marco could do. At least he could move. And I would have liked to have seen him with the full complement of offense when it wasn't 28-0. I would have liked to see him when it was 14-0, or even before that, just so maybe he can zone read. Maybe he can pass out of a normal formation. Now, he didn't pass real well, but he did. He ran for more yards in a game by a quarterback since C.J. Beathard in 15 at Iowa State. It's just, that to me is, as you said, the ironic fact is that he has always been on the side of lack of turnovers and playing risk averse. And yet they played the riskiest option that they ever could because he made the most mistakes.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me at all. I don't know what the thought process was there. But anyway, enough about that. We'll have plenty of time to talk about rebuilding this offense like the $6 million man. I think that's what they need. They need a $6 million man makeover here for the Iowa offense. But let's talk about the positives. And it's kind of a positive, right? That Tory Taylor got the punting record that was from 1938. It's kind of like that. Yeah, it's good. I'm happy for him. But what we just talked about for the last 10 or 15 minutes is the reason why he got that record. But just an outstanding career. And that's a big factor. I know the new kid, and there's high hopes for the new kid, but it's going to be a lot. It's going to be hard to replace him, especially next year.
Yeah. It's, in some ways, it's maybe not as significant as replacing Caitlin Clark, but it's in that category where, and we've talked about it for, last couple of years, replacing a Jack Campbell or a Tyler Linderbaum. You just don't replace those players. And Tory Taylor fits in that description. So does Cooper DeJean whenever he makes his announcement. And with Tory Taylor, to be able to set the NCAA record that's been around for 85 years speaks to his durability, his success level. He could punt the ball 93 times, but not with that kind of precision. And to be able to punt that many times, Rob, and yet still maintain that average, and to not only I think the first punt of the season was blocked and the rest weren't. It's truly an astounding feat. And when you look at his career, he has a case to be the greatest punter in NCAA history. And and I don't want this to be latest is the greatest, and I'm hyperbolic because I just watched it, but when you look in the totality, 2 years in a row he was FWAA first team All-American punter. That has only happened 3 other times. Once for the Big Ten. When you look at, he has the Big Ten record for average in a career. After punting that many times, he's still at 46.3 is the Big Ten record that he has set. We talk about yardage. He led the country in punts inside the 20, punts over 50 yards. It's, and then the precision punting. That's to me is more remarkable. It's harder to quantify, but the ability to knock the ball, and then when you had Cooper DeJean as a gunner and stick him inside the 5, That's how they won a lot of those games.
Yep.
And then forcing that team to go, man, I got to go 95 yards against that defense. And then sometimes directly leading to safeties. So he is without peer. And I know old dudes, even myself, I remember Reggie Roby. Reggie Roby had a cannon for a leg, probably a stronger leg, even though Toria's got a fantastic leg, but he couldn't do that precisely. They had a plus guy. They had a guy that when they were at the 40 and they wanted to punt on 4th and 9 from the 40, it wasn't Reggie Roby because he would have punted it over to those tennis courts like we used to park on.
The magic bus.
Yeah, the magic bus across the street of Melrose, So.
But yeah, and I know it's still really early in the process, but what you kind of like as we sit here today on January 4th, what are you thinking in terms of draft for him?
I think somewhere in the 5th or 6th round. I think somebody who, and it depends on like compensatory picks. Because let's say if somebody needs a punter and they've got three 5th rounders and 2 6th rounders or something like that, that's an ideal spot to go. Let's go get our punter now. Let's go get our guy. I think he gets drafted. Now I don't know if he gets drafted higher than that. Maybe he does. Maybe I'm underestimating him, but that's usually kind of the rounds for when you're going to get a punter like that. And he's, from everything I've seen, he's got the ability to stick for a long, long time. I mean, he's 26 years old now, which is, it's pretty old, but I mean,
he could punt until you're 50.
Yeah. I don't have any problem. I think he could punt for the next, 15 years.
Oh yeah.
And, because maybe his distance will shrink up a little bit, but his precision will remain the same.
Yep. No doubt. And, he's moving on, Scott, but Iowa's getting good news on the guys that are coming back. We talked offensively, a big shot in the arm with Luke Lachey deciding to come back. That's big time, and that's a good start for rebuilding the $6 million league, rebuilding Steve Austin.
How much would that be now in today's world of money? It was $60 million man, $600 million.
$600 million, yeah. That's Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
So that's good news there. And now we're starting to see the pieces come back on defense. We've got Jay Higgins coming back. We've got Jamari Harris coming back. We're still waiting on who we waiting on? Quinn Schulte, Sebastian Castro,
Nick Jackson,
and
Cooper, of course, Jamari announced yesterday, as we know, and that is, to me, of all the moves, that's the smartest one, because I looked at Jamari as he's got the tangibles that you want as a cornerback. Long arms, he's bendy, he's 6'1", he's 190, he's a good tackler, he's good in coverage. But he was out for a full year with an injury, and he's really only 1 year as a starter, even though he started 6 games in 2021. But I think, let's lay it out there. I mean, Phil Parker's maybe the best secondary coach in the country, regardless of level. You get 1 more year to take your game from being good to very good. He could go from being a borderline draft pick, maybe an undrafted free agent. Maybe what happens if he tweaks an ankle or pulls a hammy in camp? He's done. His career is done. Whereas at Iowa, you learn, you get better, you make plays. Maybe you're a first-team All-Big Ten guy, and then next thing you know, you're a 3rd rounder. And then with that, you get a lot more benefit of the doubt. So I think overall, that is of all the moves. Like Jay and I think Sebastian, I think they'll probably get good news there. That's just a prediction. That's not recording. But with Sebastian and with Jay, I think they get drafted, and I think they potentially stay at that level. But I also think, and this is where the new era fits for guys like this. That what if Castro was a 7th rounder, and what if he gets cut in training camp? I mean, okay, so he gets a $50,000 signing bonus or something. That's it, and it's a signing bonus, so it gets taxed heavier. Yep. So that sucks. And then maybe you make a practice team, maybe you don't. But at Iowa with NIL, you can make more money there, and it's guaranteed. It's got a better guarantee, and maybe maybe they're all Americans next year. And I mean, can you imagine the legacy of Jay Higgins? He absolutely was 100% deserving of our Golden Gavel Award. It was unanimous. He might win it again. But even so, if he goes out and plays the same way, he will be a first team All American. And then he'll be a guy that Iowa fans will celebrate for the next 50 years of his life. When football is way over, he can come here, sell pharmaceutical equipment or dental equipment, make 6 figures a year, live a happy life, and be known forever. Because he's like Abdul Hajj to me, or somebody like that people are still talking about 20 years later. He could be that guy that everybody's talking about a lifetime later.
171 tackles this season, ties the single season record. Andre Jackson, right, is who he tied?
Yes, 171
from the 70s.
72 when they were really bad. So
that was the last time they were shut out 3 times in a season, right? Wasn't it 72? So yeah, they needed defense then too. So that's what the guy with 171 tackles. A little bit different results on the scoreboard that season, though. But I think in addition to just what they bring on the field, Scott, you talk about Jay Higgins and Cade McNamara and Luke Lachey. These guys were all captains this year.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to miss Joe Evans. Joe Evans is not only on the field, but just, one of the more likable guys that I've covered through here. And you just talk to Joe and from talking to him what type of impact he can have in a locker room. But you get the other 3 captains are coming back from what started this season. That's important.
It is. When you have that kind of intangibles and leadership and Luke Lachey to me was the biggest coin flip of the guys coming back, because I talked to our NFL draft analyst Dane Brugler, who is probably as good as they come, and he's like, I said, what do you think if this is the case? He's like, wow, this is a really weak class at tight end. Other than Brock Bowers, he might be able to be a pretty high guy. I didn't expect him to come back, and then all of a sudden to come back to Iowa, everything's on the table for him. He might win the Mackey Award. He might be the unanimous first-team All-American. And one of the things he said on Friday that I thought really was really cool was he said, talking to his dad, and he gets the best information. I mean, because his dad, of course, played at Ohio State, was an All-American there, was a 3-time All-Pro in the NFL, does sideline work and analyst work for Ohio State now. And one of the things he said at the time was, if I could go back and play one more football game for the rest of my life, I would do it at Ohio State. And he goes, you have that opportunity there. And then, and again, this is where NIL steps in. Yep. That for a player like him or Jay or Sebastian or Jamari or whatever, that instead of making that life-changing decision based on financial means, that he could come back, have a kick-ass year. Maybe instead of risking himself and somebody projecting him and all that he could come back, win all those acclaims, and he could be a first rounder. That's betting on yourself and not being so financially dependent upon your decision that you're not taking less now because you can take more later.
Yep. And each tight end that leaves Iowa and succeeds in the NFL helps the next guy that's coming behind him. So Sam Laporta's success this year will help Luke next year.
Yes.
So it's just they've gotten the factory going now, and they're coming off the assembly line, and teams in the NFL are waiting for the next one to come off the assembly line. It's speeding up like that Lucille Ball, the I Love Lucy, where she's trying to run and he's coming off. Really old dude reference.
Yeah, that is old dude.
I know some people here appreciate this, and there's no truth that Graham Mertz is related to Fred and Ethel Mertz. I don't think there's any relation there whatsoever. This is coming off the rails. I think this is probably a good time for us to wrap this up. I do. We needed some laughs this morning, but no laughing matter going on in Perry this morning, Scott. I think some information coming out now. I don't know. You've seen. Looks like not a lot of information, multiple victims. And as you said, the shooter is no longer alive. It looks like it was a Let's see here. This is from Mitch Fick from Channel 2 in Cedar Rapids. 7:30 a.m. report of active shooting, multiple gunshot victims, unclear how many or severity of injuries, no further danger to the community, shooter identified but not named yet. So story will certainly all follow today in the state and beyond. Tragedy, tragic, and hopefully this podcast was somewhat therapeutic for people, and we were able to keep people kind of informed of what we knew in real time. But really, no, as Scott said earlier, just not a lot you can really say in these situations other than it's tragic, and I feel for the parents. I really do, and the victims, of course.
Yeah, there really are no words that we can say that can adequately describe what they're feeling, the horror. I mean, we've had, there was when your kids go to City, mine went to West and then Liberty, and I remember one day school was shut down at Liberty on a Friday, just nobody come to school because of there was a threat on Snapchat, and and there was another time there we had to evacuate West High and pick them up at I think it was the tennis facility, the Iowa tennis facility, because there was a bomb threat, and your heart just drops, and I'm sure you go through that every day. You don't know when it's going to happen. You just know that at some point horrible tragedies like this happen, and you just hope for the best as you can.
Yeah, and we've been pretty fortunate in this state, but we all were thinking in our minds, at least if you're paying attention, that it's eventually going to hit closer to home, and unfortunately, it did today, and it's awful. It's going to change a lot, I hope, just in terms of people's focus on this, and finding ways to do the best to prevent these situations moving forward. Hopefully people in charge can do that. I'm not a politician, obviously we don't make decisions on that, but something obviously needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, Rob.
Hopefully we get the best news we can out of this situation, and there's the least amount of damage as possible. But we'll let you go for now, and appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully we didn't offend anybody by doing this podcast while these things were going on. That was not our intention at all. We were hoping to keep you updated, and also give you some information on Iowa athletics, which I know is important to a lot of people out there. We appreciate everybody for listening. Appreciate the sponsors, and Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Say goodbye, Scott.
Bye, Scott.